VoyMonk video voice vlog. Yeah, Friday was a big vlog, man. I listened to that, and I want to always be careful not to do any preaching I don't do any of that kind of stuff. Like I said, I just given some of my experience, but I don't know. Sometimes I think I always want to be careful not to strafe into the telling anybody what to do. Just giving my opinion and courage and beauty, and wanted to emphasize that a bit. Going into this week, I was going to actually talk about comedy, and I talked about some of my favorite YouTube channels and stuff, and there are a few, I would say, comedy-ish type of channels and stuff like that are on here. I do like The Onion still. I think for satire, there are probably fewer things that are as on the mark or on the nose as The Onion. And I think that there is probably no more of evidence to that than the fact that over the years, the way that things have kind of morphed in the media, it's actually kind of hard to distinguish some of that satire and comedy from what would otherwise be reality. Say what you will about that in terms of whatever your opinion might be about that. I mean, in terms of the state of affairs and stuff like that. I would say that personally, kind of my take, without getting into particulars as far as dramatics or drama, politics and things of that nature. But I do think that part of the entertainment portion of that is kind of crossed over a little bit as well. And I don't necessarily blame anyone specifically for that. I just simply think that for comedy to be good, I think, for the most part, at least for me, it has to be truthful. There has to be courage, like I mentioned on Friday, and the beauty of that. And I have to say, when it comes to the things that I see and watch and view as far as news and things of that nature, like I said, I'm not going to get into anything political or anything like that. But just in terms of the overall content, I think that, news doesn't have that courage anymore. News really kind of, in a lot of ways, has failed to meet the mark. For want of a better term, I guess mark is really a bad way to describe it. I mean, I don't consider myself a mark, but, people might argue that that's really kind of what all news has been up until this point for a lot of years. And, I think that's kind of sad. I think part of the reason why comedy has kind of taken on the life that it has is because, again, there's that courage, there's that ability to not necessarily worry about, maybe the other implications, but just if something is real, people react to it. And I think going all the way back to maybe like The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, I think he was pretty good for kind of satirizing in that kind of thing as far as comedy is concerned. And many of the ways that he did that, I mean, I think late night hosts and that kind of stuff have always, going all the way back to Johnny Carson and whatnot, have taken aim at, observational comedy, stuff that we all see and can kind of gravitate and connect with. And then, of course, what we really do is, we then take that and, we laugh at it or we cry, right? And as far as with comedy, it's like, hopefully it's the former rather than the latter, right? But the point is that, like I said, I think where comedy is not feared to go, journalism and, news has shied away from. I don't I remembered, kind of growing up, when I was a kid and stuff, news ultimately being boring. It wasn't something that you really watched. Sometimes, unless you had a particular point to do. I mean, you wanted to be informed. But I can't say that within the first 5 minutes, at least in the 80s and 90s, when I ever heard about the news in the background when I was usually doing something else, that there was ever any mention about whether or not, Bruce Springsteen was going to have enough tickets when he came to town for all the people that were flying in to see his concert or something like that. I mean, I think maybe that kind of stuff would have made it into the news, but it would have probably been on the tail end as opposed to, the front and center, like, whatnot, and as far as fluff pieces and things like that about, kittens or inspirational stories, which that's all well and good and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, I can't say the last time I actually ever watched the news and truly felt informed about what was going on. And, like I said, it's like, so, it's entertaining. I think news is definitely a lot more entertaining than it used to be. And so, as I mentioned before, where comedy is kind of, like I said, Jon Stewart, satirizing the news in kind of a news format, and of course the news then following suit and then, kind of formulating its broadcast more towards entertainment. I think that line is where it kind of got crossed. And I'm going towards the latter of the 10 minutes, closer to 10 minutes. So, but yeah, that's what I'm thinking about comedy. I'll probably elaborate more on this tomorrow. So until next time, take care.